You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. I'm very excited about today's guest. This is one of my favorite companies in the industry. They're doing something really innovative, and there's some new updates in the legislations that are making this more real. So we have Joe Spector, who is the founder and CEO of Dutch, as well as a proud dog parent. Previously, the co-founder of Hims and Hers, a pioneer in human telehealth. Joe is on the mission to make the veterinary industry better for pets, pet parents, and veterinarians through telemedicine and innovation. He believes every pet should have easy access to what they need to live their happiest and healthiest life. Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and chat with you guys.
So, why don't we start with what is Dutch? What do you do? And how did you end up in the veterinary industry?
Yep, Dutch is a veterinary telemedicine platform. Essentially, we help pet parents get quick, easy, affordable care right when they need it. Most customers find us the moment that their pet is having trouble, and they're able to jump on a video call with a locally licensed veterinarian who can then often prescribe and have treatment sent to them within overnight or in the next 2 days. So it's kind of an end-to-end veterinary visit for needs that you need to see urgently and can be done over telemedicine.
Very cool. So many questions. But the first one, I think, is you worked in the human space in telemedicine. So, how did you transition from humans to pets?
So I've always, the last almost 20 years of my life, I've worked in startups, which is all about figuring things out that have never been done before. And with HIMS, I started that when it was literally an idea on a piece of napkin, all the way to becoming a public company. And after that moment, the perfect storm, I knew I wanted to go back into startups. It was the pandemic, and like so many Americans or people around the world, really, I got a pandemic puppy. And the moment I started to deal with veterinary care, I could not believe that there hadn't really been any innovation at all on the veterinary side. It's as if all the things I worked on in telemedicine, changing the laws, making it easy for guys to get care, it seemed none of that happened in veterinary care. And so I started to poke around and realized there needs to be something like Dutch built to address that.
So I just want to take one step back in your background because you are not originally from the States, and then you have an interesting story how you became successful in the States. Can you just open up a little bit on that and tell us your journey?
Yeah, I was born in Uzbekistan, former Soviet Union, and my family and I are escaped. We were refugees and lived in Europe for several months before ultimately coming to America. And even when we got here, lived on welfare for quite some time, and I ended up, paying my way through school. So I've had a life where I've just had to figure out new environments for the first time. So that's a muscle I've built over time. But at the same time, I think I was naturally someone who also happened to rebel against authority. I remember at 7 years old running away from day camp because I was told to take a nap and I wasn't going to take naps. So I just ran off and, begged for money to get on the train to go to my grandmother's house. So I think I've had that perfect storm of being anti-authority and just had the experience where I've come from nothing. I think a lot of times people have a hard time being an entrepreneur because they can't take the risk of losing their comfortable job. And I feel like because I've had those moments and I've lived through it, I'm more comfortable with that. And HIMS was this, big moment in my life where all the things in a startup actually worked. And I think really it's a lot of those experiences of fundraising, marketing, really at the highest level, and realizing, that's certainly a competitive advantage now I have as an entrepreneur in the veterinary space, having those experiences from HIMSS plus the personal experiences that I've had.
I was going to say, tell me about hims and hers, but we'll skip that because it's a horrible joke. But a lot of our audience is not going to know what hims is. I happen to. But can you go ahead and tell our audience what you're talking about?
Yeah, so HIMSS, from what I believe, it's really the only direct to consumer telemedicine company that's public. And what it is, it started with hair loss and erectile dysfunction, and making it easy and affordable and trustworthy for men to get care. It's now expanded to many other conditions, including mental health and skincare. I expanded into hers on the female side. Prior to HIMSS, there was what I remember is kind of the 90s cheesy, spammy commercials, spammy emails that everyone ignored. And it was really a category that was completely overlooked. And HIMSS came in and made it, like I said, trustworthy, beautiful, and massively affordable. I don't know if I didn't, it was shocking to me, a pill of Viagra was about $80, and through HIMSS it's a dollar or two. So significant savings that telemedicine created for men, and eventually for women with hers. So I think that, but the other thing that was going on in 2017 when HIMSS started is that telemedicine for humans required a physical exam in most states, and now we take it for granted that you can have a video call or a call with someone, but that wasn't the norm back when HIMSS started. And a lot of that is a skill set I took to Dutch to say that there's room here for people to do telemedicine, and it makes it affordable. It expands the pie. We saw millions of men who hadn't seen a doctor in years come in. So I saw the benefits of that. And again, a lot of those lessons I took into Dutch.
So cool.
Very cool. Can you tell us a little bit, so to shift, that there's, you mentioned before the recording that there is an update about California, because there was a lot of noise about how California perceives the VCPR and laws around the telehealth and everything else. And you mentioned there's an update, which I genuinely don't know what it is. So can you share on the air?
And when you say there's a lot of noise, Ivan, do you mean are you referencing the webinar that we did at the start of the pandemic where we had a bunch of people complain about it?
Well, there's a lot of people that are talking about telehealth and the problems in different states. So what is the update, if you can share that?
Yeah, so a coalition of dozens of nonprofits worked during this legislative session, and just about a month ago, Governor Gavin Newsom signed this bill into law that starting January 1st, in California, you will be able to establish a virtual VCPR, which means, California
Ooh,
was
wow.
one of the most, yeah, California was one of the most restrictive states in the nation, where you had to have an exam, a physical exam for every single new condition of the pet. And even during COVID, they didn't really, all they did is change the duration between physical exams from 12 to 18 months, which was, nothing. And this showed that one of the things, and again, this is, I think, a beauty of having someone new come into the industry, is that you don't have all the hangups from the past, and you can see things literally with a fresh set of eyes. And what was going on, and does in many other states, is that the shelters who are begging for a virtual VCPR were going to the boards, were going to AVMA, or the state VMA, kind of the folks who are the most protectionist and have no reason to change their view. And this time, the strategy is to take the legislative route, to go to the legislators who have no idea that this is going on in their backyard, and to say, first of all, we have now had years and years of human telemedicine, and all the fear mongering from is not happening. People aren't dying. People are still going to brick and mortar doctors. They're not, the opioid pill mill is not from telemedicine. Like, it's actually beneficial as opposed to harmful. So I think a lot of the legislators had no idea this was going on. And like I said, the law in California, not only will it allow virtual VCPR, it'll also allow prescribing for up to 6 months. So it's pretty cool. And as they say, what happens in California affects the rest of the country, affects the rest of the world. This has been proven over and over on environmental issues, on social issues. So I think that this will be an experiment to really show that this is going to be significantly beneficial to pets all across the country and in other parts of the world.
Amen. That sounds friggin' awesome. And there's going to be a lot of happy people out there hearing about this. It's so funny because at the beginning of the pandemic, we had this webinar that the podcast put on, and we had Doug from the OVMA, the Ontario Veterinary Medical Association, Shay Cox. Who else? We have Ivan. We had Mark Cushing, and maybe one other person. But it was a great conversation, and it just seems so obvious. But it's amazing, and I guess a big shout out to anybody that had a role in that to kind of change the industry and maybe change the world. So this sounds really good for business, Joe. So how is business? Where are you guys at in your evolution of a company at Dutch?
Yeah, business is good. Business continues to grow. We started off with really just two conditions: anxiety or behavior issues, and kind of skin and derm care, just to prove out the telemedicine model. We have now expanded to dozens of conditions, including UTIs, ear health, eye health, nutrition. And we also have started, as our customer base has continued to grow, I think we have a pricing model that works, which is that most consumers are signing up for an annual membership. So that creates a long-lasting relationship. And then we also have a storefront where consumers are able to understand what the different over-the-counter and prescription treatment options are for them. And then on the veterinary side, which I think is sort of this other side of the equation that is important to talk about, is the veterinary shortage, the veterinary mental health crisis, and the fact that we now have over 100 veterinarians who are on the Dutch platform, who are seeing patients from the comfort of their home, generally making more money than they are in clinic. And so that creates the ability for them to have flexible working hours. Almost a third of the vets had dropped out of the workforce. And so, but now they're able to work for Dutch. And then, of course, 2/3 are working in clinic. And this is something they're doing on the side to supplement their income.
This is amazing. And I just want to go one step back to the Californian law and how it may change the overall the landscape for this. But there was one thing that we just were actually with Shawn in Portugal, and one of the meetings that I was in, I was talking about the telehealth at the World Small Animal Association Congress. And we talked about the telemedicine platform that we've set up for Ukraine when the war in Ukraine started. And it was interesting to see, and we collected quite a lot of interesting statistics because there was no legislation that stopped us doing that. Essentially, we had 320 professionals in the US and Canada helping through texting, by telehealth through texting, to Ukrainian citizens that were inside of Ukraine and needed veterinary help and didn't have access because of the war. And we collected statistics on it, and it was interesting that we realized that the urgency of the cases that we saw, 23% that were urgent, 68% were non-urgent, and only 9% of cases were emergencies that truly needed immediate attention. And then in terms of what needed actual appointments, so we collected the stats on that. So 35% could be solved with technician only through tele-advice. 36% needed virtual visit, and they were resolved with a virtual visit with a veterinarian. And then only 29% required the actual appointment. So when the world was without legislations that stopped telemedicine, we have proven that 91% of cases could be resolved virtually, and 70 1% of them could be completely resolved. So that was an incredible and probably the biggest on the planet experiment that was not restricted by any laws, where we shown that this is really needed. And if there's legislations that stop this, it's just holding us back. So kudos to you to drive the innovation in this direction, and hopefully this new legislation release will really help you in your business. I have one sort of technical as a veterinarian question. I love everything you do about telemedicine, but there are some limitations for the veterinarian. So not having the ability to look at the blood work or the X-rays, and that being the next step of the process if you can't resolve it on the call. How do you guys work around that, and what are the recommendations? Do you just work with certain clinics where they send them, or what is the workaround for that?
So I think we found similar statistics to you. About 20% of the time is when we see that someone does need to be referred to in person. And what we try to do there is look up and help the pet owner come to a local clinic. By the way, we've built our own electronic medical record system. So we have those notes digitally that we can fax over to the clinic. I think the problem one runs into is like, we're in the same boat in that they can't get, it's not like they can get the same day appointment. And so they're back to square one, where if it is urgent care, that's going to be $500, $1,000, or they can wait 1 week or more to be seen in person. And so we don't have a special magic pass, but we have some partnerships like with Thrive. But again, I think, the person kind of goes into the regular queue. One thing I just want to mention about your other point about the legal barrier, which I just can't say enough of, to me, and I feel like we're in this war of words, but as a immigrant from the Soviet Union, like one thing I've learned about America as an outsider, I can say, is that you have to follow the money, and the money kind of in America dictates, at least, and in the other parts of the world, but given that it's such a capitalist country, you have to follow the money. And, the biggest thing in pet care, and also speaking of someone who came from human care, I can tell you, here's the biggest thing is insurance. Most Americans, because of employer paid or Obamacare or whatever, 90% have insurance. Whereas in pet care in America, only 3% of pet parents have insurance. So the veterinary industry, by the way, even if you have insurance, usually the way it works is you submit for reimbursement anyway, even if you do have insurance. So it's pretty much an entirely cash pay business, right? Whereas in the human world, because of insurance, you almost have this third party that's making sure there aren't bad actors. But it's also because of that, doctors are really selling services. They're not running pharmacies inside their offices. But many veterinarians actually build their practice that selling pharmacy is, let's say, a third, maybe half of their revenue of the business. It's a big, important part. And so it's kind of the elephant in the room to say that I think many of the traditional veterinarians are against telemedicine because they believe telemedicine will take away their business and they won't be able to have enough services to make up for the lost pharmacy revenue. But the reality is, and this is what we see at Dutch, is that over half of the clients who come to Dutch report that they've never seen a vet in 3 years or more. And the average pet is about 5 years old. So what that means is, the pet saw someone in the beginning, but really they haven't seen a vet for the rest of their life. This is, as I saw with HIMSS, this is net new, expanding the pie. And so I think it's important for veterinarians to realize that, there's room for both, and that telemedicine is only going to bring more people into the system who will then go to brick and mortar in times they can't have telemedicine, as opposed to thinking of a shrinking pie. And I think it's really that protectionism that has led people to push on these laws to limit the expansion of pet telemedicine.
That makes a ton of sense. Joe, I have many, many more questions for you, but we're out of time. So we're going to have you back. We've got 2 questions that we ask every guest. First is book, a YouTube video, something that you found inspiring on this journey that you've been on through human and now to animal health.
One of my favorite books of all time is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's written by a former FBI hostage negotiator. And some of the main lessons that it teaches you are to be curious, to ask questions. And I think that's so important because that's how you uncover the other side and uncover, false beliefs and false assumptions that you may have. I think it's a really great book for big and small tasks.
That's awesome. And the second question that we usually ask, is there a guest or someone innovator in our industry that you would recommend to be on this podcast?
You mentioned Mark Cushing. He has been incredible, awesome. He has his finger in so many areas. So he's always super interesting, and he really knows a lot of the history that goes, 10, 20 years back. So he's always fun to poke around his brain to understand how we got here.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.